Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, it's a year to the day since the Scottish Government published a groundbreaking proposal for a pilot for a rural visa in Scotland. In that time, the need for the initiative has only increased, and yet the silence from the UK Government on the matter has been deafening. I asked Marie Goujon this morning, when she gave evidence to the Rural Economy Committee, if she'd had a reply yet from the UK Government. She said that she hadn't. It's rare to find an issue that unites businesses across rural Scotland, unites political parties in the Parliament and unites organisations across the public, the private and the third sectors. And yet, Presiding Officer, the proposal for a rural visa pilot does exactly that. Such is the pressure on the labour market right now, and such are the stark warnings about rural depopulation, it's hardly a surprise that this proposal commands widespread support. This would allow for bespoke immigration, meeting the needs of particular sectors and geographies, enriching our communities and our society. It's modelled on the successful Canadian Atlantic Immigration Programme, which proves it could work even in a devolved context and could be transformational for local economies. And yet, despite that widespread support, despite the obvious benefits for rural Scotland, and despite the comprehensive work that has gone on in terms of developing the proposal, it hasn't progressed for only one reason, and that is the UK Government blocking it. And so today, I reissue the call to the UK Government to change their stance and think again. We need a rural visa pilot. Our businesses, our communities, our public sector services need a rural visa pilot. It's the only sensible solution. And yet, what do we see, not least yesterday? We see the Tories pursue an increasingly damaging, ruthless, despicable immigration policy that pulls up the drawbridge and inflicts devastation on our rural communities. Because for rural Scotland, the imperative for a visa pilot is based on three reasons. One, we need immigration after decades of emigration. Two, the population forecasts for rural Scotland are stark. And three, the impact will be deeply felt across all rural communities. Presiding Officer, Scotland is a country of immigrants with a long history of people leaving our shores. That's perhaps most stark in rural areas. For decades, indeed centuries, we've hemorrhaged people who sought new opportunities across the world. And that memory is in our national DNA. We, of all people, should have compassion for people who want to make Scotland their home and recognise the unique economic and social opportunities that it affords those of us here in Scotland already. So many businesses in Scotland have great ambitions and aspirations, and yet they cite the lack of skilled staff as the primary reason why they don't grow and develop. Farms and fishing boats trying to meet the ever-growing demand for sustainably caught and grown food are unable to meet that demand for lack of people. And at a time when costs are increasing, inflation has eaten into margins, the economy is stagnating, the last thing organisations need is a staffing shortage. The magnitude of the impact is difficult to quantify. But just this week, the National Farmers Union of Scotland said that in 2022, as much as £60 million worth of food was wasted on farms because of labour shortages, especially impacting fruit and vegetable produce. £60 million worth of food was wasted at a time when our children are hungry, our economy is stagnating, and key sectors like agriculture have so much to offer. And, Presiding Officer, when I talk about population, we need only look at last week's initial findings from the census to see confirmation of research that we previously knew about from the Scottish Fiscal Commission and the National Records of Scotland. They demonstrated that rural Scotland is facing a sustained and substantial depopulation. The Western Isles, Argyll and Bute, Dumfries and Galloway, Shetland Islands, Angus, Murray, the Orkney Islands and the Highlands, all of them could see depopulation declines of up to 16% between 2018 and 2043. And those figures are in stark contrast to some of the growth we see in urban areas, demonstrating why this should initially be bespoke. Presiding Officer, population decline isn't just a question of numbers and percentages. It will directly increase poverty, it will shrink the economy, and it will hamstring public services. Because if the rural population decreases and gets older, as forecasts suggest, there'll be fewer workers in our NHS, in our care homes, in our grocery stores. There'll be fewer children in our schools, enriching our communities. Our older people will struggle to get basic services. And so, Presiding Officer, I come back to the fact that tonight we aren't just complaining about the situation that our people face. We are proposing a workable, groundbreaking proposal that will reverse that depopulation and ensure that there is a viable future for rural Scotland. The proposal outlined by the Government, with support from Shetland Isles Council and the Scottish Rural Action, is a community-based approach. It allows rural communities to attract workers in line with their distinct needs. In agricultural areas, the demand might be farm workers. In urban centres, there might be more interest in attracting bespoke skills. Employers then advertise the vacancies within designated geographic areas and then assess prospective candidates before recommending those chosen candidates to the Home Office for final approval and security checks. And then, critically, and perhaps most interestingly, there would then be a package of support to allow newcomers to settle. And so, Presiding Officer, as I now draw to a close, I hope that the Parliament can once again unite, irrespective of party or constitutional lines or sectoral boundaries, and call for the UK Government to grant this opportunity for rural Scotland to reverse the depopulation decline and ensure there is a viable future that enriches our communities and ensures that our economy can grow. Thank you.